Welcome to the HR on the Offensive podcast, brought to you by Lace Partners. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the latest HR on the Offensive podcast. It's me, Chris Howard from Lace Partners, joining you as always for our latest edition of our weekly podcast series. This is going to be an interesting podcast today because we're going to talk a little bit about people strategy, and it's something that's quite an interesting one because this podcast is named after a white paper that we wrote in 2019. It's called HR on the Offensive. Obviously, you can get it on our website if you want to just download it. Just look for the insights section and the white papers. But in it, one of the things that we talk about, and again, it was written pre-pandemic, is around HR being more focused on, not HR, businesses being more focused, more people-centric, and really starting to zone in on that kind of idea of people strategy factoring into business strategy. So what I've done today is I've decided to get somebody on because post-pandemic, what we've noticed at Lace Partners is that this is something that organizations are really leaning into a lot more than during the pandemic and pre-pandemic as well. And I wanted to get a bit of a case study as an organization that really has evidencing the fact that they are delivering on that people-centric strategy. I need, of course, a partner in crime to do that. I have got back again one of our co-founders and our chief executive officer, Kathy Akrotopoulos. How are you doing?
I'm good, Chris. Excited to chat today.
This is your bag, isn't it? People strategy.
Definitely.
This is your bag.
That's what I love to spend time chatting about.
Yeah. And of course, we are going to have a guest who's going to give us a little bit of benefit of her experience. I'll introduce her before we then get to our fundamentally different question. Of course, those of you that don't know, we have a nice little icebreaker for our fundamentally different question, which is not related to HR whatsoever. And I haven't even prompted her, but it's a nice, easy one. So hopefully she'll give us a benefit of it. It's Catherine Dolan, and she has been the CPO of multiple global organizations, but including an organization called Bureau Veritas. Catherine, how are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. Very good, and glad to be here on the podcast this morning with you.
Yeah, lovely to have you on. Lovely to have you on. Now, we do this, as I've mentioned, we do this fundamentally different question, but I'm going to let Kathy go first and then I'll go. So we give you a bit of time to think about it. Now, at the time of recording, when we release this, obviously it'll be in a few weeks' time, so we'll already know the result. But at the time of recording, we're going into the Euro 2024 final in which England are playing Spain. And that's something, the possibility of England men's football team winning a tournament, a trophy, is something I didn't think I'd ever see. So I'm going to start with you, Kathy, and then I will probably have a choice as well. If you could pick, Kathy, anything, it doesn't have to be a sporting activity, achievement, it could be anything. If you could pick something to happen during your lifetime that you don't think you'd see, what would it be?
Thanks, Chris. That's a big question. I'm going to keep the sporting thing going because there's something else happening this weekend, as well as the men's football Euros 24 final, which I'm also very excited about. And tomorrow morning, at the time of recording, England rugby team, men's rugby team, will be playing New Zealand for the second test against them. And we narrowly lost the first test. I would love to see us win the next two, which would be quite unusual. We've got one tomorrow, one in November. I want us to smash it out the park against the All Blacks and come back victorious after this match to the third test in Twickenham in November and smash it out the park then as well. That would be a dream for me right now. So I'm just keeping the sporting thing, which I know we don't need to stick with, but that's what I'm going with.
Catherine, go on.
I'll continue with the sporting theme because actually one of the things that I was going to do as part of my introduction was to share my professional passion, but also my personal passion, which is football. So that was a great question to ask. And in fact, I have been in Germany to watch England play. So I went 2 weekends ago. So I am super passionate about it, the highs, the lows, the belonging, the sense of connection and tribalism. And also, I think it's a great case study in leadership. And we can draw a lot of parallels with sport. So my fundamentally different question, or what I would love to see, is Aston Villa winning the Champions League. So that would be mine. And I'm very excited about the football this weekend.
Love it. Love it. We can't have Aston Villa winning Champions League because mine was Arsenal winning the Champions League. But let's move on from that. Catherine, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and then we'll start talking specifically about your most recent activities and endeavour, which is at Bureau Veritas and the Leap 2028. But let's start with yourself. A little bit of background on yourself, please.
My entire career has been in human resources. Really, since I left university, I studied economics, but realised that my passion for people was much stronger than my passion for numbers. And so I've been across multiple different industry sectors, whether it's automotive, professional services, IT and technology. And now I'm in a technical professional services environment with Bureau Veritas has been my most recent role. I did do a secondment in operations, but actually what that really reinforced is I love HR, and my personal passion when I think about the role and my purpose is all about unlocking potential. And I think as an HR leader, that manifests itself in many ways about talent identification, the culture we create, but that's really what drives me. It's about how we unlock potential within organisations, but also within society as well.
Cool. Okay. Now let's get into the nub, I guess, of the conversation today, which was around this program, this strategy in place called Leap 2028. As I said right at the beginning of the podcast, of course, for us, the importance of aligning your people strategy to the overarching business strategy is integral. And so can you just, I guess as a bit of a framing exercise, just talk to our listeners a little bit around Leap 2028 and then the three pillars, I guess, that sit within that.
Okay, so just to give some context, I'll just tell you a little bit about Bureau Veritas. So Bureau Veritas is an organisation of 80,000 people that operates across 140 countries. And it's a global leader in testing, inspection and certification. And so what does that mean? Our purpose was about shaping a world of trust, and it's probably an organisation that touches your lives every single day. So we test things from, is salmon organic? Is that building resilient? Is that bridge built in line with building regulations? So it's all about ensuring the integrity and standards and compliance. We've got about 60,000 technical experts. The value proposition of Bureau Veritas and how it creates value is through the skills and expertise of the 60,000 technical experts that are out interfacing with clients every day.
So, Catherine, it's a really interesting business, right? And your role within that has been integral in terms of driving that business strategy. And within the Leap 28 strategy, there's a pillar specifically around people. I'd love to understand how that evolved, why that was so front and central, given the nature of the business that you were operating in, and how much that was a natural step in terms of people being such a core part of the three pillars of the business strategy, as opposed to maybe sort of having to sort of make that happen, if you see what I mean, across the exec team, because it's technical, highly skilled workforce, and therefore, people capabilities are front and center, I'm sure. But even in other businesses where that is central, you don't always see it so prominently as part of the business strategy. So I'm keen to understand how that came about and what that pillar really represented and why it was so important about driving success at Bureau Veritas.
And I think that's a really great question, because it's not, as always, a straightforward answer about how we got people as part of central to the strategy. So Leap 28 is the ambition for the organisation for 2028. And it's all about driving a step change in growth and performance. So that's kind of the overarching ambition of the organisation. And it's shaped around three different pillars. So one is around the portfolio. So, what are the services that we bring to our clients? Where are we market leaders? How do we maintain those strongholds, but also expand those leadership positions in the market? And that will be done through organic growth, but also mergers and acquisitions, so inorganic. The second one is performance, which is all around operational efficiency, global scalability, innovation and digital. And when we think about those two elements, it's impossible to believe that we would be able to deliver that step change in growth and performance without people being central because they would power the engine. I mean, that is where we will get competitive advantage in the market. Now, you would think, given the fact that, in my mind, it's so obvious that people should be central of the strategy, I think one thing that's really important to understand about Bureau Veritas is it's a very successful organisation in terms of it's financially healthy, it's continued to demonstrate a long-term track record of growth. And that's mainly been fueled by hiring external talents. So hiring 14,000 people on average every year, that's been how we've powered that engine. And so one of my challenges as the Chief People Officer was, can we sustain that approach of hiring to power the engine, given that we want to create the step change, and also convince the business that we do need to do something different and we do need people at the centre of our strategy, and we can't just continue to do what we've always done. So although it seems very obvious that people should be a central part and be a pillar, it hasn't necessarily always been the case within our organisation, because we've been very successful with more of a recruitment mindset than a retention, leadership, engagement, culture, thinking about those broader topics about what it means to create a brilliant place to work where people want to stay and grow with the organisation.
So, Catherine, following on from that, because the externally communicated strategy that was sort of shared with the market, that pillar was around evolving the people model, right, in terms of therefore moving to building, using your knowledge and expertise to train and develop strategic competencies that you need for future growth, right? That's a sort of externally communicated messaging around that pillar. In terms of the process you went through to sort of shape that thinking, I'm conscious that one of the things we talk about when we think about CPOs and the capabilities needed is that alignment of language, I guess, and the way you engage with your senior stakeholders to make it clear how you're driving commercial value and the commercial importance of, in this case, moving from a high volume recruitment solution to driving growth versus let's build our own capabilities going forward. Can you maybe share your thoughts on the way in which you needed to operate and the language you needed to use, and how you needed to take a more commercial focus to ensure the sort of importance and relevance of that was front and central to the business strategic decision making around what the business needs to focus on going forward?
I would say that I approached it with three different lenses. So one was about absolutely using the language that resonates with the business in order for them to really align and bring them on board about why we need to think differently around our people model. The second part was around really using data and being data driven about how to not justify, but explain why this is really important and why we need to make this pivot. And I think the other part is, as you know, we live in a very complex, dynamic external environment. And so how do we make sure that our kind of business ambitions or our growth ambitions, what are the external impacts that we need to take into account that will really either enable us or challenge us in achieving those ambitions? And if I take this one first, the external perspective, if I consider where Bureau Veritas wants to grow, it's in around sustainability, cybersecurity, energy transition, and those are really new economy skills. Those skills don't exist in the market today. And the same challenge, every organisation is competing for the same scarce talent. And it's been cited as one of the reasons why, which could prevent us as a society really meeting kind of climate ambitions, or because we just don't have the skills and knowledge that we need within the organisation. So part of my role was to take that external insight and share with them, if this is our growth as a business, and going back to that pillar of portfolio, if this is where we want to grow, the skills and expertise that we need of our people does not exist in the market today. It will stop us achieving that strategy. And therefore, we need to think differently about our people model, because this ingrained cultural approach of just hiring won't work. And so really, so the first thing was about bringing kind of that external insight and context within which we operate and bringing that outside view in. and really honing in on particular business areas where they're already experiencing some of those skills challenges today. So speaking to business leaders about areas in their business concretely where they're already feeling some pain, and really extrapolating that and sharing that this, unless we think differently, that will continue to exacerbate their growth as a business leader. So tying my vision and my insights into something that's very concrete for their business. The other thing was, Bureau Veritas, and I talked about its very, very strong financial performance over many, many years. And we're very execution and delivery focused. And so what's the almost performance imperative for us to think differently about our people model? And we're very margin driven. And my feedback was, or my insight was, even if you are not really driven by employee growth, employee development, you are driven by margin. And this hiring actually, I think, is margin. It dilutes margin. So the time that we lose in terms of productivity, the skills and knowledge and expertise that we lose, the time that our managers are taking in recruiting, how long it takes people to understand Bureau Veritas, our culture, our DNA, the impact of that underneath will be dilutive to margin. So really expressing it in language and priorities for them so that they can make those connections. And then the final lens that I looked at it through was really all around data. So of course I put some financial value on the cost of attrition, how much productivity time we're losing by this recruitment mindset, but also what are our employees telling us as a services company? What are our employees telling us that is important to them in terms of staying within the organisation, connecting with Bureau Veritas? And a large part of that was around career progression and growth within the organisation. And so how I achieved people being one of those pillars was really linking back to portfolio, linking back to performance, and that those will not be achieved unless fundamentally we elevate the discussion, the programmes, the priorities around people to fuel those growth ambitions.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating kind of insight into your journey and the approach there. One of the things that we're doing at the moment is, well, at the time of recording, we are shortly to launch a campaign called Becoming Skills Powered. And it was all around organizations having that mindset of, well, we're not just filling jobs because, it's backfill or because we need to get from X to Y. It's actually about trying to change your mindset as to what are the future skills that we need to deliver on our business objectives. So I think that's quite fascinating. What you were talking about there about employees, what are they telling us as well? I'm interested to find out a little bit around your team. So obviously you've had to go through this process with the C-suite, and you've talked about the commercial language, but in terms of your HR or your people function as well, how have they found evolving this kind of? Have they found it an easy journey to go along? Because naturally in your position, you're working with the rest of your C-suite peers and you've learned to adapt, and you were talking about the language and taking them along on the journey. But what about your team as well?
Firstly, from me first, really raising the need to evolve our people model, how we need to move from this, I'll call it a recruitment to a retention mindset. But when we think about what that means for a retention mindset, it sounds so simple, but once you kind of start peeling away the layers, that has an impact on the leaders that we have within the organisation, the culture that we have within the organisation, how we reward people, how we manage performance, how we enable growth and learning. It sounds very simple, but the shift from what we're doing as an HR organisation and the role that we play, it's really transformational, actually. I would say from me first socialising this concept to being part of the strategy was a 2-year journey with the leadership team, with the HR team. So the HR team at Bureau Veritas is a global team of 1,000 people. And sometimes I felt like I said the same thing every time we spoke. For all the global HR community calls, all the interactions, I was just saying the same thing over and over and over again. But one of my key lessons was the importance of alignment and just constant reinforcing about what we're doing, why we're doing it, because I think it's also about bringing the HR function on a journey and bringing our HR colleagues on a journey, because for some, their roles have been completely centred around talent acquisition. Their roles have been centred around providing brilliant operational support for onboarding, using concrete examples. But actually, it's also about the HR organisation shifting what's important, how we build a different narrative, but also their skills and capabilities as a function to enable us to deliver this evolved people model. So I think there's been huge excitement and optimism, because it's a really positive, I'll use the word leap in line with our strategy, that, I'm saying that we should be so proud that people is a pillar of our strategy, and there is no better time to be part of our function. And the fact that the business are recognising the value that we can bring to the organisation, but also this constant repetition of why it's important, the global alignment, the consistent messaging, just to reinforce where our priorities are and how that translates to what we're doing on a day-to-day basis to operationalise and make that ambition a reality.
I can really appreciate that sort of journey you've been through, Catherine, in terms of, as you say, it's sort of a 2-year process to get to the strategy and the engagement then around the HR function itself to then help work through how you make that happen and aligning on the priorities. I think for me, when I read through the sort of external messaging on the strategy itself and Leap 28, what it made me get excited about, if I was in that organisation, or if I'm in an organisation where there is a strong people pillar in the business strategy, is the mandate it gives, right? Because ultimately this is about saying this is agreed at C-suite level that this is a top priority for us as a business. And when we track our business progress towards our strategic goals, we will be looking for progress in that people pillar, and we will be prioritising that over other things that are not explicit in our business strategy, right? So it's a really helpful mandate to use as a way of aligning both executive buy-in across the business, but also HR buy-in across the business, and use as a sort of, I guess, a challenge that if there's things getting in the way, or there are other priorities that pop up, as they always do along the way, then how do we come back to that central pillar and how do we ensure we're delivering on it? So I know this was sort of shaped and communicated, I think, in March 24 externally. So it's early days, right, in terms of making that happen. But how much in your role there were you able to sort of say, sort of rely on that mandate, I guess, as a way of ensuring future success? Because how much confidence did it give you that this is going to be treated in a way that will make this happen?
So the fact that people is one of the pillars actually gave me huge positive momentum, and it's a very, very clear mandate. And when we shared the strategy with the markets in March, as you said, one thing that was really fascinating to me was that a lot of the question, I mean, this is a financial community that you are presenting to, shareholders, analysts, but a huge amount of questions from that financial community was all around the people pillar of the strategy. And so I also felt that that was really reinforcing our external stakeholders, our external shareholders are more and more interested and focused on the people aspects of our business. They understand that our ability to be successful in delivery and achieving the ambitions will not be achieved unless we have the people strategy and implementation right. So that was also reinforcing, not just with my executive team and not just giving the mandate, but also for me, it was a brilliant insight into externally how the role of HR, the importance of people, is becoming much more strategic topic and not just a secondary thought rather than more financial and performance orientated ambitions. I think the other point that I would say about, my confidence about the execution and implementation is, yes, we have this evolved people model and it's centered around 3 different streams. So one was around skills, which we've already briefly touched on. What are the strategic skills that we need to develop and build because they don't exist in the market, and how will we do that from our own people and really become a school of sustainability in particular because those skills don't exist. The second one was around employee experience, which comes much more back to if we want to retain those people within the organisation. What does the culture need to be like? What does it need to feel for our people to work in Bureau Veritas every day? And then the final part was around career growth. The reason why that came to the fore was because that was really part of the feedback that we were getting from our employees. And so there are concrete programs and KPIs and OKRs, and there are a number of concrete measures that sit underneath that to make sure, yes, it's not just about the vision and the ambition from a people point of view, but how we know we've achieved it, how we know we're making progress, and really giving something concrete that we can just continue to focus on to make sure, going back to your question about the HR function, so that the HR function are clear on what measurement looks like, what good looks like, so that we maintain that focus.
Brilliant. This is annoying because we're running out of time, but I did want to jump into, I feel like I could really unpick some of this quite a lot, but and have a proper delve into it. But we try to keep it to a 30-minute podcast. We'll do a little bit of extra time though, because some of the bits I think you were talking about there resonated with some work that I know Kathy has spearheaded from a CPO. We've done a blog on it before, and we've done a pod on it before as well. So you can check it out on our website, which is around the different hats that you have to wear as a CPO, because it's a multifunctional role which encompasses such a wide-ranging remit. Kathy, I don't know if you can just, because I think there's a couple of bits that resonated with what Catherine was just talking about, but just for those who maybe haven't heard the podcast that we did on this, and I guess also for Catherine's benefit, because it'd be really interesting to understand from your perspective, Catherine, these different hats that exist that I'll get Kathy to go through in a second, but then also any of them that you perhaps have to lean into a little bit more than others. But Kathy, do you want to just frame it, and then we'll get Catherine to give us some insight?
When we're thinking about the role of the CPO, Catherine, a lot of what you're just describing really resonates in terms of the different hats that you need to wear as a CPO, and the juggling act, I guess, that you need to go through to keep those hats firmly on the head, or have capabilities that help deliver those hats within your function. Just a very brief recap. So the first hat is around the service expert, recognizing that ultimately, whilst we are there to transform and deliver value, HR functions also have a service provision focus 24/7 to drive the employee experience and be there to support employees and line managers in their roles. And that almost gives us the mandate word again to do other things, right? Because that's where some noise comes from if we're not doing that well, right? If we're not paying people on time, or can't answer questions, or can't support them through critical life moments very well, then that gets in the way, I guess, of our mandate to do other things. So service expert at its core. The second one is around the experience architect. Catherine, you were saying you have a stream around that, right? Around the people strategy and the way forward at Bureau Veritas at your time there. Ultimately architecting that experience to deliver on your value proposition for your employees. What is it that you need for it to feel like to deliver on for your employees, so that you do both attract and retain quality people over time? The third, which we've emphasized a lot on this podcast, is around the transformation enabler. So in this case, obviously that's front and center with the Bureau Veritas role that you've been in, that ultimately is saying, how does the people function deliver outcomes that drive business growth and business success? And in your case, having that front and center within the business strategy as a people pillar. And the final one is around the compliance champion, which is actually, when it comes from a risk and issue management perspective, people risks and issues will be escalated ultimately to the CPO if they're of significant scale or PR impact, for example. So there is a risk management and mitigation role. There's also compliance when it comes to things like REMCO and equal pay and all the other sort of reporting and regulatory aspects that differ in geographies, but also in industries. So that compliance champion element there. And within that, you've also got the employee relations side of the business as well. And then from feedback from our CPO network, we've also added in a fifth perspective, which is the head that wears the hat. And ultimately that becomes almost the cultural conscience of the organization, as well as maybe the coach to the executive team around leadership behaviors and cultural alignment, recognizing that the CPO role is quite unique in that respect, in terms of how much you are maybe more of a coach to individuals around your peer group and the CEO, as well as holding the mirror up sometimes around, are we exhibiting the right behaviors and driving the right cultural change ourselves as an executive team? So we've talked a lot about transformation enabler and experience expert, but I just want to see which bits of that resonate, and whether, from your point of view, the challenge of juggling all of those different aspects in one role.
Yeah, so you can't see it, but I was smiling as you were talking because, when I think about the role of a CPO, you've categorised it much more succinctly than me. But, I think that I'm a technology and innovation driver. I think I'm a risk and compliance manager. I'm a culture champion. I'm a talent architect. It's all those things. And there is no doubt that there is, it is a multifaceted leadership role, and it also needs a diverse set of skills and to be able to navigate the complexities of the role. So it completely resonates. I think my approach is, or how I think about it, is that there will be different elements that really come to the fore at different moments. So it's having the agility to be able to really flex and focus where it matters on each of those roles that we have. It's about aligning the HR organisation so that, even as the CPO, you have kind of the expertise and maturity within your own organisation on some of those elements. So, for example, we talked about service delivery or service expert. How do we make sure we've also got the right expertise within the organisation? So I have trust and confidence that that piece largely runs smoothly. I think the other thing, this is much more of a personal reflection, is recognizing that you have so many hats that you have to wear and you have to fulfill in order to be successful in the CPO role. Being really clear from a personal point of view about those that really give you energy and those that less so. And so when I find that there are elements of the role or the hat that I need to wear, which I find, more personally challenging or less exciting, then really make sure that I'm also creating the space and time to do the elements which I find energizing, motivate me personally, so you can manage across the breadth and complexity of the role. And I just love being with people that are doing kind of the real work out in the field and connecting with people. And for me, that's a real energy giver and part of the role that I absolutely love.
That's a really, really interesting insight. I love that idea of kind of creating the space for the time, for the thing that then motivates you, because ultimately we all do our jobs and lots of us love our jobs that we do, but there's certain parts of it that you love maybe a little bit more. So being able to find that time to really lean into it, then your passion almost then permeates out to the people that you're then working with as well, which I think is great. Unfortunately, we are out of time though. We've gone a little bit over. Hopefully you wonderful listeners that have been listening and have enjoyed it as much as I have. Catherine, thank you very much for joining us. It's been really, really interesting to get your insights on the Leap 28 program, the 4 hats, and then also the kind of journey that you've taken the business on from a people strategy point of view. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure.
It's been great. And Kathy, as always, thank you for co-hosting with me today.
Thank you, Chris. And I love getting CPOs on our podcast. It's brilliant to get sort of behind the curtain, if you like, and see what goes on. And in this case, really brilliant insights, Catherine, in terms of the alignment of people goals with the business strategy and integrating that going forward. So really helpful insights. Thanks very much.
So thank you. And my final comment would be, let's hope England win on Sunday. Thank you.
By the time this gets released, listener, you will already know. So you'll already know if at this point we are going to be happy or we are going to be sad. I'm going to let that, you have the power yourselves to, obviously with hindsight, to know that. But again, from myself, from Catherine, thank you very much for listening. You can get us in your ears anytime you want on the HR on the Offensive podcast. You just need to go to our website. If you go to lacepartners.co.uk/podcast, or you can just search for HR on the Offensive wherever you get podcasts. But once again, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll catch you next time on the HR on the Offensive podcast. Bye-bye.